Okay, good morning. Last week we talked about the sugya of Bais Yaakov, right? And we spoke about all the origin of the sugya, the Gemara and Saita, the Isser that seems to be Gepaskind and Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, and I guess the evolution of how we got to where we got to today. I think we came right up to the point of where we realized that maybe we might have overdone it a little, but. Whatever, that was the shmooze. Now, I maybe should have started with this, but I guess ein muktam u'mocher. So I want to go back to a little bit like how it was before Bais Yaakov, what girls learned and stuff before there was the official Bais Yaakov woman teaching them, and some of the Peiros Hanoshrim, like the shilas that are relevant to it. So I just Bitar Hakdama. So there's an interesting genre of svarim. It's not a very popular genre of svarim today. I mean, maybe it is in its own format, but it's not. You don't see them around anymore too much. But there's a sefer over here. It's the sefer I'm holding is a Shailas Tshuvas Masas Binyamin. Now, anyone who's learned Yeridea or any other Smiktsaya and Halacha, well, knows that the Masas Binyamin is from the core building blocks of Psak. The Taz, the Shach, the Bach, the Prisha, the Sma, they all either corresponded with him or quote him or learned by him. He's a Talmud of the Ramah and the Marshal. He's one of the important links, so to speak, in the Messiah of Halacha, from the Ramah and Marshal's Tkufa to the next Dairis of the Achreinim. He's quoted all the time in the Sefer Psak and whatever. Now in this edition, in the back of the new edition of the Shut Masas Binyamin, they have over here another sefer that the Masas Binyamin wrote. Masas Binyamin was a Rav, a lot of different places, but he wrote this when he was a Rav in Haradna, which is Grodna, I believe. In the I'm going to say it's the late 1500s probably. Call it 1590, let's say. He wrote the sefer. It's a sefer called Seder Mitzvahs Hanashim. And the sefer is all about halachas that are negeya for women, all halachas that women need to know. And it's not addressed for men to read. It's written in like a Yiddish German. It's hard to read today. It's not the exact Yiddish that we speak anymore. But it's written in an old Yiddish, and it was written directly for the women. It was not intended for men to read. And it went through all the various halachas that were negeya to women. Meaning nida, but more than nida. It's a heter, how to run a Jewish household, meaning it's broken up into sections. There's Hilchas Nida, there's, I think there's Hilchas Chala, there's, it's a lot of different, covers a lot of the different halachas that they need to know. Now, there's a few interesting, I guess, facets of the Sefer that some were controversial in their time, meaning he's not the only one or the first one to write it, not the first or the last, but he's maybe the biggest Paisik of note to write a Yiddish Sefer for women. Now, what's interesting is that the Maril in a tshuva is very against these svarim. The Maril in one of his tshuvas writes that svarim like this are a chorban, because what happens is women take these svarim, they read them, they think they know everything. Now they have a Vestis question, a Ksamim question, if it's a Shverish Island, Bittel by Chala, they don't go ask a Rav. They say, I know this already. It's on page 82 of Say the Mitzvahs Nashim. I learned it in Yiddish. I know the halacha. And they might be missing all sorts of variables and whatever, and they can make all sorts of mistakes. And because of this, the Maril says that there shouldn't be svarim like this for women to take home and learn their own halacha. You have to ask a Rav. It's not possible for women to paskin their own shilas. Now, be that as it may, the Masas Binyamin clearly didn't agree, and he wrote the sefer. And what's interesting is that in the sefer, in a few different occurrences, he writes. I wish I could read this type of Yiddish better. I need an interpreter. But he writes like a few points, at complex points in the halacha. He writes, "Women, be careful." I'll read it in Hebrew. If you have a shver shayla over here, lo yifsiku ba'atzmon. Don't paskin yourself. Yishalu shaylas rav. You have to ask a rav. But lo yizberum nachanu hasefer v'chima chilik ben shaylas rav ben chipish b'sefer. Don't say I have the book. The rabbi just has the book also. What's the difference if I read the book or the rabbi reads the book? I can paskin the shayla, because sometimes kileitim ein anashim yedis chaymer Iyun. This is what he writes to women. Sometimes women don't realize how chamra these things are, and you need to ask a rav instead of pasking for yourself. Now, what's another interesting, I guess, facet of the sefer, and I think is that he writes all throughout the sefer. He writes like this, like in the heading of the beginning of the paragraph, "Mein liebe Tochter" or "Mein teure Tochter." He's like addressing like Koisagid, Bais Yaakov. He's talking the way you talk to women. He's "Mein liebe Tochter," and he tells them all these different halachas and etc. Now, the sefer itself is not the first or the last, and this was, I guess, the most common form of education for women. Back in the day, 500 years ago, it was books written in Yiddish that were geared to the halachas that were negeya to women particularly, and that was the Sefer Halacha that were for them. Now, probably one of the best sellers throughout all of Jewish history is a women's Sefer, and this one everyone's heard of, although come out nobody opens it anymore, but the Sefer Tzena Rena was published, I think, from the time it was published in 1610 the first time, until call it, I don't know, till the war, it was published, I think, 220 times. 220 new Maduris of the Tanna Rebbe, which is a crazy success. That's like, I mean, you have to talk to art school. What's a common amount for, batches of printing of a sefer? But 220 Maduris of a sefer is an incredible success. It was widely popular, and the Sefer Tanna Rebbe was a little bit different. It wasn't halachas for women, although there are some halachas that are in the Tanna Rebbe that are like unique to Tanna Rebbe, native to Tanna Rebbe. I'll share one of them in a second. It was primarily a sefer that was chumash with mefarshim, meaning what was maybe we saw last week controversial in the Satmar Rebbe's tshuva, and the Klezmer Rebbe's tshuva, and etc. It was chumash with mefarshim, and there are even midrashim that the Tanna Rebbe brings down that we don't have any other makar for. Meaning there must have been an old medrash that the Tanna Rebbe saw when he was writing it, and that don't exist. I mean, that don't exist in our Sefer Svarim Midrashim anymore. So that was an extremely popular sefer. The old Yerushalayim, a joke goes that in Yerushalayim, in every shul, there would be a Tanna Rebbe leinen, where they would get together on Shabbos afternoon and they would read it. Now, the reason why you'd have a Tanna Rebbe leinen is because a lot of women couldn't read, but they wanted to hear the Tanna Rebbe. So there would be either a man or a woman who could read, who would go in the shul and would read the Tanna Rebbe for the Olam. Said, and every week it was jammed. Everyone would come pack the shul to hear the Tanna Rebbe leinen. The only week that was empty was the week of Mechiras Yosef, because these women would say, "I don't understand what's wrong with this Yosef guy. Why are you going to see them? You know they're going to throw you in the pit and sell you." So they couldn't do the story again. This is like an old Yerushalayim joke. In any case, the Tanna Rebbe was a form of education for women. Now this is what education was before Bais Yaakov. It was basically Svarim like Seder Nashi, which are Yiddish Svarim that were written for halachas, and Svarim like the Tanna Rebbe, which is drushes and agadas for women that are, I'll say that Torah. Now, what do you say? On the Tanna Rebbe? We know almost nothing about him. We know his name, Reb Aaron, but something we almost nothing about him. He wrote a bunch of Svarim. He wrote Svarim on Nach. He wrote Svarim on Nach. He wrote Tanna Rebbe on Chumash. He wrote drushes. He must have been some kind of Magid. We know very, very little about him. Interesting stuff. I said there's some halachas that come from there. There's a Bakanta Skula. I'm pretty sure the sources, the early sources of the Tanna Rebbe. I could be wrong. There's a Bakanta Skula. I don't know if anybody's done it. On Hoshana Rabbah, after we're finished with Anuim, women who are pregnant take an esrig and they bite off the pittim. Right? Anyone's done this? They bite off the pittim. Now, some of the Gedolei Achronim, like the Chavas Yair and his Makar Chaim, and the Minchas Lazar and Darkei Shalom V'Chaim, say that this is a terrible minhag. It's bizei mitzvahs. Maybe even the esrig is muktzil mitzvah, huktzil mitzvasa. Till later, you can't do it, and that's minig ra, and it should be nisvatal. But Lamaisa, if you trace it back, it's quoted in various different svarim. It seems the first place that introduces this minig of biting off the pittim as a skula for women who are pregnant is the Tanna Rebbe. Now, so there's other few examples. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that's the first place that it says. And there's a whole tefillah. The tefillah is not in the Tanna Rebbe. The tefillah is later. There's a whole Yehiratzin where you say basically, I don't know if anyone's done it. The Yehiratzin goes more or less that according to the daya that says that the Eitz Hadas was esrig, which is one of the days in Chazal, Chava saw this beautiful pre and was not able to control herself, and she ate it right away. I, on the other hand, was able to control myself for 7 days, and I didn't bite the esrig right when my husband brought it home. And you see that this should be a kapara for Chava's Aveira, and because of that, the einshim of Chana of Beitzvitel Libanim and all the rest of it should be somewhat mollified, and I should be safe. This is the tefillah. Now, okay, in any case, this is just I'm just trying to wind it back all the way to what chinuch habanis was a long time ago. Now, the shayla that I really want to discuss is what about, and this happened throughout Jewish history. What about a woman who's not happy with this and she wants more? She's not happy. She feels like this is amaratzistic. She grows up in a rabbanish family. She has benin v'chasnin rabbanin. Her father was a rav. Her husband's a rav. Everybody else is handling tifin in the gam v'alis, and she's not happy just hearing some midrashim on Seder Parsha. She wants more. Is she allowed to? Meaning, we talked last week about institutionally teaching the girls, like that being the whole thing that we do. We teach our girls. But what about if a lady decides on her own, I want more. I'm not happy with that. I want to do more. So A, is she allowed to? Is it mutal halacha? Is she allowed to? B, if she does, is she mekayim mitzvahs tam Torah, or is it stam some sort of something? And C, let's say she really achieves some sort of Ramah and Limud Torah, and she knows things. Could she pass shilas? Could she argue with her benin v'chastin rabbanon? Could she get involved in the sugyas? These are the couple of questions that I want to discuss. Now, I want to start it with really probably the most famous educated woman in Klal Yisrael's history. I think probably, and that's Bruria. Right? Bruria is a feminist icon because Bruria was educated. Bruria spoke up to the men. Bruria was not afraid. Bruria didn't hold her tongue. And I want to talk about Bruria for a minute, just as a like to set the table over here, and you'll see how her story really is an interesting like node in the machlekes over here. The Gemara about Broya is quite a few places, right? The Gemara in Eruvin. So now I just want to separate the Gemaras we had about Broya into a few categories. There are the primary Gemaras that are brought down in the Bavli about Broya. You could put into the basket of Divrei Musar. She's not really paskening Shailas. She's more giving Divrei Musar. For example, the Gemaras in Eruvin that discuss her, she meets Rabbi Yossi Aglili, no less, one of the Gedolei Tanoim, and along the road, and Rabbi Yossi Aglili asks her, Be'ezeh derech lelud, how to get to Lud, and she tells him, I want to read it to get it right. She says, Rabbi Yossi Aglili mahalach b'derech l'pagashayis. She says, Be'ezeh derech lelud. She answers him back. She says, Gliloi shit shaita, you Galileite shaita, loy kachamru chacham altar b'sicha meisha. Didn't Chazal already say altar b'sicha meisha? You should have said Be'ezeh lelud. You didn't have to say Be'ezeh derech lelud. You could have said Be'ezeh derech lelud. You could have been makatzer. So she's giving Rabbi Yossi Aglili the Tana Musar, but like Musar with an open hand. Not she's giving him she's telling him Musar. Elsewhere, the Gemara in Eruvin tells us that she found the Talmud who was learning quietly, and she told him that's not a way to remember anything. You're not going to remember anything like that. If you don't learn with a little bit of a koil, with a little bit of a song, you're going to have nothing from it. She tells him. So she was. These are you could put into the basket of, let's call it Divrei Musar. Now, mitzad sheni though, the Gemara in Psachim tells us that she was able to learn 300 halachas on a certain miktzaya in the same day from 300 different rebbeim. Meaning, that's like a researcher. Like she had up to Shaila, and she went to every Talmud Chacham in town and discussed it and got 300 different halachas. And Ben Yada explains that it's very hard to learn 300 things from 300 people in the same day. It just becomes all one big soupy mix, right? I'm saying you don't know who said what and where it comes from, and you have no sprach with anybody. But Bruri was able to. She was able to collect 300 days on the same shaila and master it in one day because she was obviously very capable in learning. Now these are all call them what they are. Now, in the Tosefta in Tyrus, in a few different places, in Kalim, in Kalim Tosefta and Kalim is split up in Baba Kamba, Mitzvah, Basra. The 10 first prakim, 10 middle ones, 10 last ones. So in Kalim Baba Kama and in Kalim Baba Mitzvah, there's two Gemaras there where she argues with Tanoim about sugis in Kalim, when certain Kalim become Torah, when the Tum is over for them, and both times over there, later Tanoim agree with her and say Yafa Amar Broya. Broya said good, like we paskin like Broya. And one of the dinim that Broya says over there is brought in the Mishnah in Kalim, Shalai Bishma, brought down in the name of a different Tana, and we taka paskin like it. So Broya seems to have been heavily involved in the Gufa sugis, not like in the just I'm giving Musar to Talmidim, not an outspoken Rebbitzin. Broya was in Beis Medrash, and she was arguing with the Tanoim in the Shverste Sugis in Tyrus. And Taka, one of the Rishonim, the Rash Mekinun, when he writes, he says, Matzinu Tanois bein Tanoim. We found a female Tana amongst the Tanoim, the Hainu Broya, who's arguing with them, pretty liberally. She's not afraid to argue with them. Now, so where does this all end up? Now, before we get to the end of this story, I just want to share a beautiful Medrash Mishlei about Broya Eshes or Meir, just to. The way we're discussing Broya, it sounds like a outspoken, harsh, strong woman. And I wanted to show you the other side of the coin. There's a Medrash in Mishlei that says as follows. It's a story with Reb Meir. Ma'aseh Reb Meir. Reb Meir was Broya's wife. She was sitting and learning the Beis Medrash Mincha b'Shabbos. Umesu shtei banov, and his two sons died. Now it's a terribly tragic story. Reb Meir has two children. They die on Shabbos Mincha time, and Broya knew, Reb Meir didn't know yet. So she went. What she do? Ma'aseh ha'im. She puts them in a bed. And she spreads a sheet over them, and she doesn't shed a tear. The Medrash says it's Shabbos. She doesn't shed a tear. She puts them in bed. She spreads a sheet over them, and she leaves them there. He says when Reb Meir came home, b'moitzi Shabbos, when Reb Meir came home from the Beis Medrash, he tells his wife, "Heichen banai, where are my children?" She tells him, "Well, the Beis Medrash. They went out to learn Avos Ubanim already. It took you too long to get home. They're gone. They're already out learning. The Beis Medrash halchu." He says, "Hibati b'Beis Medrash. I looked around. I didn't see them. They're not there. I want to make." So she gives him a kais for Havdalah. He makes Havdalah. Then he asks again, "Heichen banai, where's my children?" She says, now they must have gone, I sent them on an errand. They went to Makamplani to pick up something. They must be on an errand. They're doing something already. So she gives him some food. Again, Heicham Banai. She keeps trying to stall him. She's not telling where the kids are. She keeps distracting him with some food, some drink. Till finally he says, Amrullah, she tells him as follows, Rebbe, Shaila Achas Yeshle, I have one Shaila Lishal to ask you. Amrullah, Imri Shalaschat, so tell me your Shaila. Amrullah, Rebbe, before today, someone came and he gave me a pikadon. Now he came to return it. He wants it back. Should I give him back what he came for, what he gave me, or should I not? Amrullah, he tells her, what type of question is this? Someone who has to be kaddish has to return it. Of course you have to return it. What type of question is that? She tells him, if not for the fact that you said that, I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't feel that way. And then obviously she takes him to the room, and the imagery of this medrash says, "Ma asasa tafsa isa biyadai." She takes Reb Meir by his hand, v'halasa lecheder, v'kriva isa lemita, not la'asad and malgvias panea. A whole like a story. She takes him by the hand, she leads him to the children, she reveals them. So Bruria has this very call it very supportive womanly side also. Bruria is not just this female Talmud Chacham giving Musar. Over here you see like a very different side of the coin. Now what's tragic is what the end of Bruria is. There's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah and Daf Chas. It's a famous Gemara for a different reason. But the Gemara in Avodah Zarah and Daf Chas brings down the story with Reb Meir and Bruria's sister. Right? It's a famous story. Bruria's sister was captive, and Reb Meir went to redeem her. It's where the whole idea of Elikad Meir Arneni comes from, right? Reb Meir goes along the way to redeem Bruria's sister, and he tells Bruria that if she was nizer and she kept herself, how she's supposed to, everything will be resolved fine. And it's a whole arichastic Gemara. I don't want to spend too much time reading it now. But he goes, he saves her, he gives money to the watchman. The watchman asks, when the money's gone, what should I do? And he says, when the money's gone, you say Elikad Meir Arneni. And the Gemara tells us how the watchman spent some of the money on a bribe, a little of the money to run away. Eventually, the justice caught up with him, and when he's mamish at the point of greatest danger, he says Elikad Meir Arneni, and he gets saved. Now, the Gemara ends off like this. It says as follows. It says, the end of this Gemara, it ends off a line, Kam arak asal Bavel. Reb Meir ran away and he came to Bavel. Iked amri mehai maisa, because of the end of this story, because he was in legal trouble, because he bribed an official and there was legal trouble happening. Iked amri mehai maisa, ve'iked amri mimaisa de Bruria. The Gemara doesn't say what that is. Some say because of the story of Bruria. So Rashi over here brings down a fascinating story. Now what's interesting is that Rashi is the first Makar that brings the story. There's no one before Rashi who says the story, and because of that, many Achronim are mefakfik that maybe it's not a real Rashi, it could be something that was inserted later. There is no real source for this besides for this Rashi, although it is quoted by the Maril and the Meneres Hamar, but they're all coming from Rashi, and there are Achronim, later Achronim, because of various kashas, as you'll see in a second, who don't like the story. But Rashi says as follows, Pam achas, ligliga al sha'amru chachamim nashan daitan kalas. One time, Bruria was malaglig on this Maimar Chazal that says Nashan Dait and Kalas, that women are not capable, they're not credible intellectually. So V'amar lachayecha, Reb Meir told her, Seifcha lahaydis l'devreim. You'll see, you're going to be moided that the Chachamim are right. V'tziva l'echad mitalmidav is mitzav one of his talmidim l'naseisa l'dvar avera, to trick her into dvar avera. V'hiftzir b'yamim rabim. He worked on it many days, ad shenisratzasa, until she was nisratza. When she realized that this was a setup, she hung herself, she choked herself, she killed herself. And Reb Meir ran away because of embarrassment. This is what Rashi brings down. Now, it's a nidin in the Paiskim and the Achreinim. I'll tell you why. Because it's l'fnei first of all. Second of all, why is that the einish for being malaglig? It says pam achas one time she's malaglig, so the einish is meaning there's Achreinim who for various reasons are unhappy with this thing that's brought down in Rashi, and because of that, there is some Achronim that say that it's not a real Rashi, it's a thing, but I didn't do enough to speak one way or the other. I'm just sharing that it exists. Lamaisa, in every printed edition of the Shas, it's here. And this is the Sefer of the Maisa de Bruria. Now this is a very tragic end to a very, very potent and educated woman. Now, why is this all relevant? So I want to read you a little bit from a back and forth in two shittas in a tshuva, how to learn a Tosefta. We went through the Gemaras in Saita that said that but Rabbi Eliezer says Kol Malam es Pite Teri Kil Malam de Tiflos, and the Gemara in Yuma tells us that Rabbi Eliezer says Ein Chacham Nashim El Beplach. Right, they're only supposed to be dealing with sewing, and we spoke about the Yerushalmi that says Rabbi Eliezer was willing to sacrifice tremendous amounts of money for that shita. But there's a Tosefta as follows: a Tosefta in Brachas that says like this, and it's brought down in the Yerushalmi in Brachas and Tosefta Brachas. It says as follows: Hazavin v'Hazavos v'Hanidos v'Hayoldos. Zavin is males, but Zavos, Nidos, and Yoldos are three female types of tumah, women's tumas. Mutarim l'kreis b'Torah. All of these categories, they are allowed to read b'Torah, u'l'shanes b'Mishnah, and to learn Mishnayos, b'Medrash, b'Halacha, b'Agadas. Now this is a strange Tosefta. Here you have a Tosefta in Yerushalmi that's saying that women who are tmeyos, men and women who are tmeyos, are allowed to learn the whole retinue of Torah, every type of Torah, every subset of Torah, Limud, Mikra, Mishnah, no distinction between Torah Shabbat Sav, Torah Shabbat Peh, no distinction between Iyun and not Iyun, no distinction between mitzvahs that are negated to them and not negated to them. All the later distinctions that we saw in the Agur, in the Smag, in the Ramah, in the Beis Yai, all the later distinctions are washed out. The Tosefta seems to be very general. Women could learn whatever it is. Now, this is a kasha. Now, what's interesting is that in the Bavli, in Brachas, in the same place, when it brings it down, it doesn't say that. It says hazavin, v'haboyele nidois, mutarim lomoid, all these things. So the Bavli clearly edits it and is amending it to something different where it doesn't include women. But the Sefta and the Yerushalmi have this girsa that says zavin, zavais, nidois, it's all the same, have this regarding the shayla of learning. And because of this, you have, so to speak, a stira. Meaning, what do you do with these two things? This Sefta doesn't seem to stem with anything that we said until now. So the first easy teretz is to just say that the Sefta holds like Ben Azai. We know even in Bavli there's a shita that's chaylik, Ben Azai is chaylik, but the Sefta holds like Ben Azai, and the Bavli that changes it because we pass like Rabbi Eliezer. And there are even some achronim that say that this is how the Rambam knew to pass like Rabbi Eliezer connected Ben Azai, because you see the Stam Gemara amended the Brisa, not like the Sefta, because we wanted to stem with Rabbi Eliezer, not like Ben Azai. That's how some say. Others say, and this is the Tzitz Eliezer brings this, and the Sheva Levi argues in him. He says as follows, but he's really coming from a Chida and others. He says as follows. Yesh l'taretz. Tosefta lekasav shemalamdenois and likers b'Torah. Tosefta is not talking about teaching them Torah. It doesn't say you could bring them back to Bais Yaakov and teach them cheder. Elakasav b'lashin umutarim likros. They're allowed to read. They're allowed to learn. V'hainu me'atzman. That means you're talking about a woman who's not satisfied with what's being taught and she wants more. A woman wants to learn more. The Tosefta is talking about her. You want to learn more? You could learn more. No one's forcing you not to learn more. To learn on their own, there's no way that's written about that. The Rambam writes that a woman's not mechuyev to learn, but if she learns, she gets schar. He says, and here he's quoting a Prisha, and the Prisha says this in the Torah, in Sim Reish Mem Vav, I think the Prisha says this, and there's an interesting Prisha. A father is not allowed to teach his daughter Torah, the Dilma Taitzi Devrei Devrei Havai. Because Chazal were chayshish that a daughter or girls in general might not be perfectly suitable, and they might be Maitzi Dvarim Devrei Havai. A father, even a father who's teaching his young daughter Torah, does not know where she's going to end up, what her, what path she's charting in her life, what life is going to bring for her. He doesn't really know. If she learns herself, you see, she's a motivated, dedicated woman. She's committed to this, so then you don't have to worry that she's going to weaponize and use it for the wrong things. You see, she wants it. That therefore says the Prisha, if she learns the Torah properly and she's not Meitzir Lev, she has schar. So the Prisha and the Prisha is learning like this in the Rambam, and Mamela learning like this in the Sefta. That the reason why this what the Sefta is referring to is because they're learning on their own. And Taka, the Chida in Tovayin and Simadalit, and his Shuvas in Tovayin and Simadalit, he says even more so. He says that a woman who's mature and an adult woman who shows commitment to learning, you're even allowed to teach her. Because the whole reason Chazal said not to do it is because she might use it for divrei havai. She might, use it the wrong way. But once someone already made that commitment and you see that they're serious about it, just like you see from this Prisha and you see from the Tosefta, you're even allowed to teach them learning. And because of this, some poskim say that this is how you explain the episode of Broya. And Broya is not the only one. Broya is the primary one. The episode of Broya that's interspersed throughout Shas of a very highly educated woman who was learning and teaching and whatever, because she, as an adult, decided she wanted it. She was the daughter of Rav Chanina ben Tradian, Rav Meir's wife. She was, surrounded by legendary Tanoim, and she wanted to do this. She's allowed to do it. Now, it comes along the Chalkim, and they say as follows. There's a Sefer Mishras Moshe al Rambam that says as follows. He brings the Chida and he argues. He says as follows. He says, Chachamim le'nasnu l'vereim l'shirim. You can't tell me that Chazal say in Isser, an Isser Muchlet in the Gemara and Saita, and Azayz Gepaskin in the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, but it's, asterisks. That's only in general. But someone who really wants is allowed to change their mind and go further. He says, Chazal didn't give the Dvarim l'shirim. V'gam be'inyan kavanasa anan lebekinon. Also, you're telling me the reason why Chazal asked it is because they're afraid of this only? Maybe there was other cheshbonos. How do you know? Like any general exeris Chazal, you can't pinpoint it and tell me that it's mut in this case. And then he says this crazy line. He says, "V'gam sofer shel bruya hechiach al tchilasa." The sad end of bruya, how she ended up being honey trapped and trapped to do an avera. Let's say she didn't even follow through on the avera, but that she was susceptible to this. At the end of it, the sad end of bruya tells you that hechiach sefer tchilasa and bruya was the wrong thing. It wasn't the right thing to do. And because of this, the Shevet HaLevi and others bring this and say that no, even if someone wants to learn, I believe even if a woman is not happy with the status quo and she wants to learn more, it's not optional. Chazal said, "Kol olam l'spid Torah, kol olam l'tiflas," and you're not allowed to. Now, Bizman Hazeh, we spoke last week, is an expansion of Dvarim Hanegeh to her or Stam. Okay, that's last week's topic, Ayin Sham. But this is the 2 kilo ways to perceive the sugya of Bruria. Now, there's another question or two, but we're running out of time. There's another question or two about, so let's say she's learning. Let's say you hold like the Prisha and the days that hold that she's allowed to if she wants to. Is she Mekayim mitzvah Talmud Torah? Is it a mitzvah Talmud Torah? Does she have bittul Torah if she stops? Does she have an issur of shikchas hatayra? If she learns it, she's not allowed to forget it. Meaning all these dinim, and this rayas lakan. I'm not going to have time to go through that in detail because I want to just get somewhere. But there is the Maril, in the Shut Maril HaChadashis, I think it's in Shuv Memhei, over there when he handles the famous shaila of why women make Birchas HaTorah, right? This is a famous shaila, B'skirav. If we had more time, we could talk about it. But when he's handling the shaila of women can make Birchas HaTorah, Teichilei Dvarim, he says that they have halachas to learn that's negay for them. And he says, when they're learning, I want to find you the line, when they're learning, I can't find that, when they're learning, it's Limud HaTorah, it's their chi of Limud HaTorah, and therefore they make Birchas HaTorah. So the Maril in Shuvas HaChadash seems to be saying that the women, when they learn, now granted he's talking about learning the halachas that are negayah to them, and really maybe you can't learn from that to learning in general, more learning if they want to. But the Maril HaKapanim is saying that women are b'teiras mitzvahs Talmud Torah under some circumstances. Now there's a lot of rayas lakan and lakan. I'm going to just gloss over that because I just want to get to two very interesting examples of nashim, educated, smart women. This one's a little bit of a vakanta example, but I think it's we can't talk about this Indian without sharing it a little bit. In the Hakdama to the Drisha and Prisha from the Sma, in the beginning of Yeridea, the son of the Prisha writes a whole Hakdama where he writes amazing things about his father and amazing things about the Sefer that his father wrote, and etc. And then he writes as follows: "Zola'atzer b'milin miyachol, milahalas ala Sefer u'lesaper roiv goydel tferes yikar mailas isha achshuva." Hagvira, Hatsanua, Vachsida, Vayeshara, Alohi, Imi Mirasi, Rabbanas Maras Bela, Basaktin. He says, I want to talk to you. I can't close out of here without talking to you a little bit about my mother. She was wealthy, Tzanua, Chasida, and straight, he says. And she should have a Lichtig Gan Eden, and as follows. He says about her like this. She helped my father get to everything that he was going, everything about him. And then he says, Bais says her father was very wealthy. He says, my mother was an only daughter, the son of my grandfather, the famous Gvir he's writing. She could have had whatever she wanted. She was a rich girl. She could have had whatever she wanted. She was disgusted by Tanuga Elam. She was always trying to be kind of herself. She fasted for a long time. And then he continues and he says she would sit from morning to night with Svarim. She would daven, early with a lot of kavanah. She had the key to that as nashim. She was there from opening until 2-3 hours after everyone was finished. Sekes Batera, Pasha Yemei Shavua, and Pirush Rashi, Vishar Mefarshim, Kidu Lachol Tamid Avi Marizal, Meichli Shachan, Shetamad Asher Hayu Poitun Asholchem B'Divrei Torah. How you say Izeres Kigever Chalatzav Masamat in Divrei Torah, Lupam Shem Tzim Midaita is a Pshat Masuk B'Davar Nafut. He says everyone who was guest at my father's table, you all know she knew Chumash with Mefarshim cold. And any time the Ilam was saying a vart or saying something, she would jump in, and sometimes she would say her own chiddush. Said she was sitting and learning, Chumash and Mefarshim. And Befrat, he says, Bedine Nashim, Bilchaz Nida, he said, Bekiya, Kamat Ke'achim B'Bal Heira. She was a Bekiya in all the dinim of Bilchaz Nida, almost like a Bal Heira. And now he goes off and he says, Habitu Na Ru'u, innovation la halacha that she has. And he brings a psak from his mother. Halacha l'maisa psak from his mother as follows. When we make Hadlakas Neris when women light candles on Hadlakas Neris on Erev Shabbos, so normally every mitzvah you're supposed to make a bracha over l'asiyasan. The problem is that when you light Neris, when you make the bracha, you make Hadl Shabbos. So because of that, what they do is they light first and then they make the bracha, right? They cover their eyes, they light first, then they make the bracha. Now what about Yom Tif? Yom Tif, you're allowed to light a candle on Yom Tif. So l'chayra, it should be hadradina to making the bracha beforehand, like Avil Asiyasan, make the mitzvah in the proper time. Now, this is a needed in the Paiskim. The Drisha, the son of the Drisha and the Prisha brings over here from his mother that his mother said that l'chayra on Yom Tif, the right way should be to make the bracha before because Avil Asiyasan, and my father was masking Torah, and it seems like that should be the halacha. This is what he brings. So this is an innovation that she invented, and she says, Yom Tov, it doesn't make sense to have the same din. Now, come along the Paiskim, later on Paiskim, the Magen Avram brings this psak from the Drisha's mother, and he says no, from the Drisha's wife, and he says no, he doesn't agree, and he says, he throws in, I want to get the exact quote, it's not en chacham nashim plach, it's, he says as follows, the Magen Avram says, he does. He says, he brings up Kach Kasav B'Seif Sefer Adrisha B'Even Ezer. b'shem imay. This is a psak that's brought down in the Drisha and Even Ezer b'shem his mother. Aval ein chacham l'nashim lechilku chacham. He doesn't bring ela b'plach. He leaves out the little like shtech, but he says ein chacham l'nashim lechilku chacham. Nishtazay. No, she's wrong. Ein chacham l'nashim and chacham lechilku b'shirim. They said it how they said it. Now l'maisa, the Neit Yehuda and Dagam Ravav Afanart. It's in Archaim Sim Reish Samach Gimel, and other of the Gedei Achronim agree with the mother of the Prisha. And the Neit Yehuda, when he ends off, he says as follows. He says, let me get his exact quote. The Neit Yehuda, when he leaves off, he says, I can't find it. No, that's someone else. I can't find the exact quote, but the Neit Yehuda says that another play in words. I forgot exactly which play he uses. That no, the wife of the Prisha is correct, and like Chachmas Nashim Mansa Beisa. Like no, you can trust her. You can take her psak to the bank. So here's an example, Kilo, of the psak of a woman making the Shulchan Aruch. Now I'm totally out of time. I really wanted to talk about if you should have the privilege of bumping into a woman who's a real Talmud Chacham, could you ask her your shaylas? Meaning, could she pass in shaylas for you? And this is really like I guess opens up the sugya of call it the public role of women. Meaning, there's so many more shaylas of this, like. By certain camps, women say Kaddish, for example, or etc. So maybe we'll pick this all up, the public-facing part next week, or we'll move on to maybe Bas Mitzvah celebrations. I don't know, something. We'll see. One of these.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.